warrior, father, pet owner. We're going to see which of the S-class heroes Nolan from Amazon Prime's Invincible could defeat in a one-on-one battle upon Earth. And we've got a lot of heroes to get through, so let's crack right on. Tiering is as follows. They lose, which indicates that Nolan's raw power will be too much for them to handle, and he wins via knockout or worse. Inconclusive means it can go either way depending on how you look at certain factors of the fight, or something about it just leaves me too unsure to commit on either side. Needs prep indicates that the only way they'd be able to win would be with prep time to organize their arsenal or exploit Nolan's weaknesses. So this is mainly an acknowledgement that some heroes aren't styled for a sudden encounter of this magnitude, yet have the possibility to win if given time to prepare for their opponent, as would usually be their method. And they win means that whether it's by knockout or worse, the S-class hero should seal the deal. I've covered Viltrumite scaling a few times already, so I don't want to do another big song and dance about it again, but for more you can check out the scaling in a video I'll put in the description which you can watch after. To outline the main things, the most reasonable scalings have Nolan between the multi-continental to small planetary ranges at his maximum capacity when given plenty of build-up from space for a circumstantial maneuver. However, he scales differently when engaging in regular hand-to-hand combat upon a planetary atmosphere, as proven by the series time and time again. Unlike some others, I mainly scale Nolan to his fight performances instead of fancy knick-knack feats which don't narratively translate to his battle effectiveness. A common flaw in many interpretations is believing Nolan scales to the Viltrum busting feat in standard combat, when the material itself makes it clear that's not the case, since a Viltrumite charging through space with a massive amount of build-up and a Viltrumite engaging in standard combat under gravity are two completely different things. This is evident by how Nolan takes damage from island-level laser attacks and could be beaten comatose from significantly lower scaled opponents like the Immortal, War Woman, and even Red Rush. Proving in canon around island level power or melee hitting him at super speeds can harm him. Another misconception to try and counteract this is Nolan apparently moving a planet alone as his younger self. This is also unreliable, since not only does he not actually state this verbatim, but his stronger future self struggles to lift far less heavy objects, and he has been shown to face challenges in contests of strength against weaker opposition, so you don't even have a genuine reason to interpret it that way in the first place outside of a sneaky upscale. And it's lifting strength, not attack potency anyway. So at worst, you have a non-visual, non-specific statement that can't be used, especially since Viltrum are known to use their own forces or other civilizations to aid in matters like this, and at best, you have an inconsequential statement which evidently doesn't translate to combat via contradictory battle showings of a stronger Nolan. If you're accurately taking the narrative material as a balanced account and not choosing to label him based solely off inconsistency, then in general hand-to-hand combat without being in space or having thousands of miles in uninterrupted momentum, Nolan should be around multi-continental at the highest from what attacks are available to him in a standard fight, and still is susceptible to compounding damage from lower scales as evident by fight scenes and relative character showings like Mark in the recent seasons. We all know Invincible is wildly inconsistent, more so than shows like that usually can be, so I personally take stock in a balanced approach going by what the narrative is presenting, since the lower takes disqualify all the higher feats as outliers, and the higher takes practically beg you to ignore canonical fight scenes and relevant plot showings in favour of vague statements, contradictory calcs, or circumstantial feats. And with Invincible scaling, the fun never ends. The combat speed is just as topsy-turvy. Again, you can go back to the previous video I mentioned to get my extended thoughts at the time, but okay, Nolan is objectively slower in combat than Red Rush, who is around massively hypersonic to relativistic for being able to defeat Kursk, who can produce lightning which can reach 60,000 miles per second. Your interpretation of this can vary, since Kursk himself is not a speedster, and has ordinary human attributes outside of this according to the handbook, even though he seems more like an enhanced human to me, which means beating Kursk doesn't necessarily mean you suddenly scale above the speed of his lightning, just that you can aim dodge his movements or overwhelm his more humble reaction speed. For evidence, here's Red Rush defeating Kursk before he even realizes it in both cartoon and comic, which shows Red Rush can defeat him without a lightning bolt even being fired at him, and another one where Duplicate, who is not a speedster in any sense, is able to rush him. Since we are focusing on the show, the latter is true of the Amazon series too, but this information is just to make it clear that Kursk's reactions are not as fast as his lightning, not that the show's lightning is even convincingly portrayed that fast in the first place. Additionally, Red Rush is never stated to be faster than light, nor represented as such, and it's telling that any actual mention of the numbers indicate it to be less every time. The handbook states 400 miles per hour, and if you calc his run from Chicago to Moscow and back in under 2 seconds, it comes out to the lower end of subrelativistic. This same Red Rush is so much faster than Nolan that Nolan couldn't match him for speed and had to anticipate his predictable attack pattern instead, indicating that at least as far as upon Earth goes, Nolan shouldn't be anything above subrelativistic for combat speed, especially as the handbook makes it clear that attaining near light speeds on a planet would cause irreparable harm to them under Invincible's own universe rules, which basically proves in a nutshell that the vast majority of hits tagging Viltrumites on Earth are not reaching near light speed, otherwise it'd be evident. Throw this in with Nolan having combat speed relativity with the likes of the Immortal, who many people note in the hypersonic ranges, along with getting tagged and jumped by Reaniman and such, and this further makes the narrative intention of his combat speed clear. Even the Flaxen surface feat is relativistic at best, but it requires acceleration and wouldn't be effective on a singular formidable target, which is why he never applies this in canonical 1v1s, so it fails both the light speed and the in-character test. I know this might come as a shock to those of you who are very used to hearing MFTL combat speeds, and generally people never like to reverse on a scale they've gotten used to believing or telling others, yet when I look at the show from top to bottom in context, it's clear that they're not. I don't intend for this Omni-Man section to sound dismissive, because he is very powerful, but with all the unreasonable scaling out there to the point where some are even now trying to say Viltrumites can beat up Goku and Vegeta, you kinda have to curb this stuff early for a valid approach. And let's face it, it should be very easy to understand at face value from watching the Amazon series that these characters are not what highballers try to peddle. And if you're going to write that cope about flying speed in space equaling combat speed on Earth, don't bother. The majority of us already know it's not true.
So shut the fuck up about
it. So he won't be able to just toss someone into space if they're actively hitting him or faster than him, nor will they just let that happen either, so he can only do this to people who he can comfortably overwhelm. With that stated, Nolan's got some fights to do. Up first we have Puri Puri Prisoner, and the stakes have never been higher, because if Nolan loses, he might just be the next guy making Puri Puri Prisoner a sweater, if you catch my drift. As usual, when it comes to two characters with brick fighting styles, the stronger and more durable one usually comes out on top. Prisoner certainly has the speed to not only keep up with Nolan, but his striking style also utilizes a more frequent and tenacious pattern of attacks when you compare their fighting styles, meaning Prisoner will be the more volume heavy attacker in this encounter. Unfortunately for Prisoner, he lacks the required amount of power to put Nolan down in a quick enough time, and while his punches would certainly be felt, they do not have enough effectiveness to overcome Nolan's superior power coming back at him. Of course, Prisoner does have a rather strange body where he can adapt to certain attacks on the fly. However, as shown when he fought Sleeping Gardo, if the strikes are simply far above what he can handle, Prisoner will go unconscious before his freaky genetics can come up with a disturbing answer. They lose for Prisoner, since in a battle of brawn, Nolan's strength and durability would tank Prisoner's higher volume, then overwhelm him with sheer force. Tank Top Master is our next challenger, and let's be honest here, how do you expect Nolan to win when he's not even wearing a tank top?
Are you sure?
Get out! Just kidding, Nolan, take it easy. This is somewhat similar to Prisoner, so I won't dwell too long here. He's likely outmuscled by Nolan, since Nolan can punch Tank Top Master harder than he can punch Nolan, and Tank Top Master's fighting style is not a good match for a stronger and more consistently durable foe. They lose for TTM, since again, when two bricks collide, typically the stronger brick wins, and Tank Top Master doesn't utilize speed or skill well enough to create a conversation for him winning this level of contest. Zombie-Man, on the other hand, can take everything Nolan can dish out, and more, since unlike Nolan's former friend, the Immortal, if you cut Zombie-Man into pieces, he's going to regenerate back in one piece without the GDA needing to jigsaw him back together. On the other hand, Zombie-Man won't be able to do too much consistent damage to Nolan either, and while he does have impressive weapons on hand, they won't be enough to cause fatal damage to the Viltrumite. So, we have a stalemate on our hands since neither can kill the other? Not quite. You see, while Nolan probably wouldn't be able to kill Zombie-Man, he's definitely able to win via other conditions. Pulverizing Zombie-Man enough to keep him stuck healing while he flies away somewhere else could be seen as a win condition, since it shows Zombie-Man cannot stop Nolan if time was of the essence. And another win condition would be Nolan throwing Zombie-Man into space if he couldn't think of any other way to get rid of him permanently. Some might say that there's no proof being thrown into space would kill Zombie-Man, and while you might be right, he's still going to be trapped floating up in space with no way to get back at Nolan. So one way or another, Nolan solved his Zombie-Man problem. And if that's not counted as a win condition, I don't know what is. They lose for Zombie-Man, who would either be beaten until Nolan gets bored and leaves, or if he throws him into space for an out-of-bounds loss. Metal Knight, however, will be the first interesting contender on this list. Make no mistake, Nolan should be able to defeat the bulky robot usually associated with Metal Knight, but it has to be remembered that it's not a single Metal Knight drone which is an S-class hero, but Dr. Bofoy himself. The bulky mass of durable metal is a lot tougher than some fans understand, however its firepower and durability is limited when confronting threats past what its on-hand arsenal can provide. Robotic strength, missiles and heavy plating will give Nolan a tougher test than those Reanimen did, so maybe this unit would wrap Nolan's cape around his head and treat him like a member of the Geek Squad for a moment or two like they did. However, this won't last for too long. No, the real question here comes down to Dr. Bofoy's full force and astounding intellect. With the speculation revolving around Bofoy's true arsenal, we don't truly know how far his capabilities go, but it is enough to worry even the Hero Association itself. However, if tasked with taking down Nolan, his isolated location would give him the right opportunity to truly craft one hell of a hit job. With the full might of Dr. Bofoy's army, his countless technological applications, and what his genius control of a science would uncover during the process, whether it's through a war of attrition until he whittles Nolan down, discovers Viltrumite weaknesses through weapon tests in battle against Nolan, or blows him away with sheer forces and numbers, needs prep is the tier I'll rank for Dr. Bofoy, who would never even be found by Nolan in the first place. Pig God is a character who I think is essentially the Hero Association's version of Gums in cross-verse battles. He's powerful and has a very specific toolset, but everyone just assumes in a challenging battle, he'll lose. And unfortunately, I tend to think the same. Pig God's entire thing is eating you, so when he comes across a character who has a reasonable ground to be beating him up, we all just tend to ignore the eating part of his game and assume they'll evade it or break out from his stomach if they were to be swallowed. I'm sure many of you are thinking right now about how if Nolan was gulped down into Pig God's belly, he would just fly out like a boss while Pig God is lying there like it were a mukbang gone terribly wrong. The thing is though, whenever Pig God has swallowed something with the intention to digest it, they never come back. And they're usually monsters who if you looked at beforehand, you would say, yeah, they definitely break out of his stomach. And they're all a lot bigger than Nolan too. Look at how big Eyesight was. Eaten with no issue. The Great Food Tub, swallowed and instantly killed inside of Pig God. These are creatures who should be able to break out of his tummy in theory, but as One Punch Man shows us, if Pig God eats you and isn't intending to spit you back up later, then you are actually just instantly dead. This guy's stomach acid might have planetary AP for all we know, so there's a real world out there where if Nolan gets eaten, despite all the triumphant ideas you have about him flying out of there, he might just actually straight up get melted. However, that's just speculation, but I wanted to mention about how we all collectively downplay Pig God in tough matchups. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be singing a different tune with more showings in the manga's future, since he is apparently holding some kind of special technique back. They lose for Pig God. Yet until I see a monster get digested and fight its way out from Pig God, I will always have this feeling in the back of my mind that he gets downplayed, even by myself. Another character who I think gets underrated in cross-verse battles is Drive Knight. I think it has to do with how his style is so versatile that it actually makes some people believe he's not particularly powerful at any one thing. But it has to be remembered that he defeated a Monster Association cadre by himself. This feat alone indicates that not only will he be strong enough to hurt Nolan, and through varied means, but also that he'll be fast enough to see anything Nolan does long before it gets to him, and in return his own offense should be far too quick for Nolan to do anything about. Considering Drive Knight during this period is more or less around relative footing with Genos from the same raid, albeit that is without counting 10-second mode, this is a hero who can be very dangerous to Nolan. With the speed Drive Knight has combined with his lethality and tactical acumen, it's very fair to say that he can do a lot of damage to Omni-Man if his strikes start to rise in number. And given his speed, skill and careful approach, Nolan will have a tough time not only trying to predict this faster opponent, but each shot is going to compound over time. Additionally, with all of the different transformations Drive Knight has, this is only going to further confuse Nolan. Even if he grabs Drive Knight, he can shift and reconfigure instantly into another shape and specialty, meaning 1 second Nolan is getting sliced and diced by blades, hitting him at relativistic or above speeds, and the next he's being doused in poisonous gas and acid by a bike, only to have a sensual's metal horseshoes bucking him in the face right after. Drive Knight is one of the most ruthless, calculating heroes in all of the association, and specializes at finding weaknesses both before and during battle. However, despite this sounding like a slam dunk, I'm going to put him in the needs prep tier, because Drive Knight is a hero who works best after observing his foe for a given amount of time and adjusts his strategy accordingly. There is the potential for him to still do serious damage to Nolan and win in a spontaneous fight, but I think needs prep is just more character accurate and a safer tier. Super Alloy Darkshine is truly a question mark in this video. It all really depends on how strong and durable you really think he is, and if you think he could take Nolan's attacks, because Darkshine is certainly capable of hurting Nolan. If the Immortal and even Pillow Punch's Red Rush can bruise and bloody Nolan, then Darkshine in theory should be turning his face into lasagna, since even a light jab has exploded monsters stronger than those who've beaten the Immortal. Darkshine's combat speed is generally accepted to be faster than Light, or relativistic if you want to downplay it, yet both of those are still tremendously above what Nolan can do himself in hand-to-hand combat when throwing the fisticuffs around. We know that Darkshine can hurt him. The real question is, can he take it back? Quite frankly, that fight against Golden S has done a lot of damage for Darkshine's reputation in fights like this. It's hard to push the narrative that Darkshine wouldn't be floored by someone as physically strong as Nolan, given how Golden S sent him flying. Yet Darkshine was mentally challenged by seeing someone with more sculpted muscles and a greater shine than him, which isn't something he'd get from Nolan, since, for as strong as Nolan is, he's not bulkier and shinier than Darkshine. This really comes down to one thing. How strong is Darkshine? How strong is Vomited Fury Ugly from his humiliation boost? And how strong is Golden S? We know from the manga that a narrator's statement places Darkshine's lifting strength at a level which is no longer quantified by numbers. That's not Darkshine saying that. That's not another character giving their opinion. That's a narrator statement specifically regarding his physical strength. Judging by how people like to scale Invincible, we should all count ourselves lucky. If a narrator said the exact same phrase about a Viltrumite, they'd be using it to say every Viltrumite is essentially the equivalent to Saitama, and Thrag could solo Dragon Ball Super because his strength is incalculable. But over here at One Punch Man, we've got this tremendous statement sitting around that we barely ever use or bring up. Someone could try to use this to upscale multiple characters to either being stronger than anything numbers can value, or to insinuate that other characters are so good at what they do, it can overcome those who have strength incalculable by numbers. We don't do that though, because Darkshine being stronger than anything humans could ever calculate seems a bit much, but it does beg the question, just how strong was Vomited Fury Ugly in his peak state of humiliation, and how strong was Golden S in that strength-specific evolution? All this to say Darkshine is a weird person to pin down, because it's obvious his strength is utterly ridiculous, and he can not only hit Nolan very hard, but very fast too. However, he's not one to dodge. Inconclusive for me. I think Darkshine has the stats to win comfortably if he decided to avoid Nolan's hits and speed blitz him, but his fighting style instead leaves him directly open to getting blasted in return. So this really comes down to whether or not you think Darkshine can tank a bunch of Nolan's best attacks. If Immortal can stomach a handful of punches before going down, it shouldn't be too difficult for Darkshine to do the same thing and then blast Nolan down to a lower scale, but not handling that Golden S punch is kind of a problem in the other direction. I think Darkshine could blow Nolan away before he gets blown away because of the speed gap, but Darkshine is a bit of a goof at the same time, so I don't trust him either. Let me know in the comments where you land on this one. Now, we've had a few characters lose on this list because they'd either not be able to dodge Nolan reliably, or because their fighting style involves them taking hits, which wouldn't be a good idea to do against a top tier Viltrumite. Flashy Flash won't have that problem, because not only is he a dodging extraordinaire, but he's also so fast in dynamic combat movements that Nolan's never going to lay a single finger on him. If Nolan had to anticipate Red Rush's attacks in order to catch him, then he's going to need a fortune teller to predict Flashy Flash, and it still won't be enough. with Red Rush capping out at relativistic speeds at the very highest, which is already stretching it since nothing supports that, Flashy Flash has been shown to fight significantly past the speed of light multiple times. This makes Flashy Flash so much faster than Red Rush, who was already blitzing Nolan, that Nolan literally wouldn't be able to even see him. And if that's not enough, Flashy Flash is an astronomically better and smarter fighter than Red Rush, which means not only does Nolan have no hope of ever even sniffing him, but Flash won't even be making the same mistakes Rush did either. Flash is one of the most gifted fighters in his verse, able to fight off and defeat multiple master ninjas at the same time, even when being attacked simultaneously. And his keen instinct allows him to predict and sense danger, as he's honed his skills since a young age in a ruthless ninja village designed to create living weapons. We already know that Flash can attack faster, more dynamically, and with greater finesse than Red Rush, who could bloody and bruise Nolan with his own speed. So this is already concrete narrative proof that not only could Flash harm Nolan without weapons, but he could do so to a greater effect than the Guardians, and would compound fatal damage upon him in a very short amount of time. Throw his sword insta-kill into the mix, and this makes it incredibly clear that his blade traveling at faster than light speeds will slice Nolan to a leaking mess at the worst, and perhaps even cleave right through him at best. Whether it's death by 1,000 cuts, lethal stabs, or a clean slice through, Flashy Flash dismantles Nolan flawlessly and wouldn't even get touched once. They win for Flashy Flash. And if you're still thinking Nolan just has to hit him once, don't forget, Flashy has taken several hits from the likes of Platinum S and Monster Garo, so even if by some miracle Nolan struck Flash, which he'd be long dead before by the way, since Flash canonically takes as many immediate kill shots as he can, then Flash could still take that hit from Nolan. Piggybacking off Flash, we have Atomic Samurai. This is another swordsman who operates at faster than light speed, and combining his attack potency with his speed indicates through narrative evidence that this will be fast enough to cut straight through Nolan. Atomic is so cracked with his technique and speed that he sliced through Rhino Wrestler a countless number of times so fast that not only did nobody even see it happen, but he cut him so finely that Rhino Wrestler's body was able to still talk, function, and even move for about 20 seconds before the dismemberment then occurred. What makes this even crazier is that Rhino Wrestler should be around massively hypersonic in reactions too, further showing how insane it is that Atomic cut him clean through to such a precise and numerous degree without him even realizing that Atomic had even initiated an attack in the first place. This is all without the Sunblade, by the way. If you give Atomic the Sunblade, then Nolan likely loses in 1 or 2 slashes instead of many. They win for Atomic Samurai, since he speed blitzes him with an insane amount of slashes which either kills him instantly or immediately compromises him to a vastly lower fighting condition after the first wave of cuts, to where he can't even operate at his normal scale any longer. Atomic with the Sunblade would make this a total mismatch more than it already is, since he'd be fresh without having fought Black S and gone through the surface battle before using it either, which means he'd be able to use it a lot longer than he did against Golden S, which people underplay since he was already placing dozens of slashes with that thing while already exhausted, which is more than enough cuts for someone Atomic can hurt with his regular blade alone. You can claim Atomic would win only through the Sunblade if you think his normal blade won't work, but going by the narrative chain of evidence in combat, if the Guardians and the GDA laser could wound Nolan, then Atomic's regular blade operating past the speed of light is having zero issues making him bleed. And another man who will get the job done is Silver Fang. This is such a huge mismatch in skill that to even suggest Nolan could land a strike on Bang is actually mental. Like the previous few, Bang is already faster than light and has fought for extended periods against Monster Garo, which is an indicator enough that Nolan will be completely overwhelmed in speed by a fighter who can break him down in the blink of an eye. Interestingly, some people wonder if Bang could redirect a Viltrumite's punch using Water Stream Rock Smashing Fist, and the answer is very easy. Of course. Redirecting an opponent's strike comes down to a few main factors. Is Bang fast enough to react to it? Is the size of the attack small enough for Bang's hands to redirect? Is the force of the attack within his scale to handle? All the answers to this for Nolan would be yes. Not only has Bang stated he can redirect any attack regardless of the power, but ignoring hyperbole like that, the only attack Bang probably couldn't redirect would be the Viltrum busting space dive, which is not an attack Bang would stand in the way of, nor is it a move Nolan would have the circumstances to perform in a duel as proven by Invincible fight sequences. Nolan's general strikes are absolutely nowhere near his top scale of attack seen when flying through space, so through actual hand-to-hand and baseline bull rushes under gravity, everything he does can be redirected back at him with double the force with the greatest of ease. Bang clears significantly in both fighting speed and fighting skill, to the point that even if the old boy were tucked under the bedsheets at 7:30 PM for an early rest, and Nolan suddenly burst through the ceiling above to punch at him, Bang would still deflect that punch back in his face. Bang's deflection is so nutty that if he ever met the X-Men, they'd just assume he was a mutant who has the power to deflect things. This man can make people 10 times his size punch themselves in the face with a swing of his foot while he's busy doing something else. His martial arts are so cracked, he can redirect literal dragon level energy blasts with his bare hands. They win for Silverfang, who'd put Nolan into his second coma and sent flowers to the hospital after. Now that I'm thinking about it, doesn't Bang look like he could pass as a really old Viltrumite? Child Emperor, when operating at his best, is one of the most impressive heroes in the S-Class. His genius intellect, adaptive strategies, and wide array of gadgets make him very versatile, even to the point where it's easy to overlook how physically capable he is despite his tender age. Now, this section has started pretty positively, so I know some of you are getting a little twitchy and saying, "Whoa, hold up there, cowboy. You're not about to suggest Isamu can be Omni-Man, are you?" And the answer to that is of course not. Not in a random encounter anyway. Child Emperor still has a lot of growing to do, so he's not quite on the level needed to get in Nolan's face when caught lacking, as he'd likely be swatted aside after a bunch of his on-hand gadgets just can't settle the scrap. Although, Child Emperor is not the type of character who fights best on a random pull-up. As shown in the Monster Association arc, he's always very aware of his own limitations and resources, and takes measures to get Brave Giant involved if anticipating a tough battle. With Brave Giant, he was able to perform outstandingly well against a powerful dragon level threat in Phoenix Man, who is vastly above the Guardians who comatose Nolan, and faster than all of them in direct combat, with the only contention being Rush. Given Brave Giant was able to fight against Phoenix Man on equal grounds and withstood all kinds of attacks, including a giant iceberg being smashed on top of him, and without any notable damage, it's actually not a stretch to say Brave Giant would be able to fight against Nolan. The only issue would be the timer, since Brave Giant only has a few minutes to work with, which actually isn't all that big of a deal when fighting at relativistic or faster than light speeds like Brave Giant can do. Which not only makes this durable robot a machine capable of hurting Nolan, but a machine a lot quicker than him too. This of course doesn't take into account that with prep time, Isamu could also use sound frequencies to overcome Nolan if he were to learn of a Viltrumite's weakness, be it through experimental theory or research. Needs prep is the tier for Isamu, but I'm making it clear that he needs prep to compete, not that it indicates he will definitely win, since I think both have the means to defeat each other here. If you think Brave Giant's energy cannons, electromagnetic saber, and sheer force could harm Nolan, which is perfectly reasonable given what has wounded him canonically, Isamu should win via brutalizing him at speeds Nolan can't accurately counter from a larger foe, which is something else Viltrumites can struggle with in their showings. I know one or two of you are foaming at the mouth at the thought of a Viltrumite having trouble with a mech, but two bummy flaxen mechs were rocking Season 4 Mark's world for crying out loud, and Brave Giant has the both of them on toast. Essentially, Brave Giant is a larger, faster, smarter, and higher skilled threat to Nolan than the Guardians of the Globe, who he barely scraped through, and while I'm not sure if killing Nolan is possible here, rendering him unconscious is. However, Isamu will need prep, as Brave Giant is not in his everyday arsenal. Genos, as of his most recent upgrades, should do well, making him one of the robot types who should not need any prep. While he's not as fast as a serious Flash is, he is still fast enough to not get immediately speed checked by him, which is what Flash always does to people. This means that current Genos is minimum faster than light, and if we're being honest, we've all known he was a few upgrades ago anyway, based on other reliable feats, so this just drives the nail in as of recent times. Current Genos is capable of completely destroying dragon level monsters with incineration blasts, and considering his weaker upgrades could punch large monsters into pieces, current Genos is also able to do this at a far greater level. I don't want to get too bogged down here. This is basically the flashy Flash section, but replace the ninja parts with incineration cannons, blinding light flashes, punch and kick force greater than any Guardians member, and a ruthlessness which will not see him go easy on Nolan at all. They win for Genos, since he can speed blitz him in outright combat very easily, and his method of attack is literally speed blitzing followed by instant devastation with either his cannons, strikes, or both. I'm not suggesting he one-shots Nolan or anything of the sort, but he will beat him to a pulp, and if you think he's catching him like Rush, again, you're not understanding the difference in combat speed consistency between these two characters and how much more unforgiving, skilled, and high-paced the fight coming to Nolan will be in comparison to a less talented individual like Rush. Metal Bat is a similar case to Prisoner, TTM, and Darkshine. He's going to be taking hits while fighting, as that's his usual MO. The difference here is, unlike these guys, he's proven to be far more durable in battle. If Metal Bat pumps up enough, he will get to a point where he knocks Nolan clean out, or far worse, and is already capable of rocking Nolan without reaching his max pump, given once he enters dragon level ranges, he will be swinging much harder than any of the Guardians, who all had the means to harm Nolan. If War Woman could do this to Nolan, a moderately pumped up Metal Bat is going to change the shape of his skull. The big thing is what a lot of people like to ask about Metal Bat, and that's, can he survive long enough to get pumped up? The question, unfortunately, is always answered by people who don't know enough about Metal Bat. If beating Metal Bat before he pumps up was easy, everybody would do it. Metal Bat can take an insane amount of damage, and it only catches up with him when a fight ends or he thinks he's out of imminent danger. But until then, breaking this man down is not an easy task. There's a ton of evidence, but I'll choose one. Metal Bat was able to take direct hits from Sage Centipede, which is a massive creature sent by God to defeat the fist that turned against God, and it's so large it can stretch from Earth all the way to space. It's one of the most powerful creatures in all of One Punch Man, consisting of over 6,666 limbs and scales around moon level, perhaps higher. Metal Bat took numerous direct hits from this thing and not only survived, but pumped up enough to damage it right after by severing both antennae at once. This part is often mistakenly thrown in with the resonance condition, where Gardo and Metal Bat coordinated in such a way that amped Metal Bat's power to then crack the armored shell of Sage Centipede. Metal Bat tanking all of those hits and severing the antennae is separate from the resonance feat and happened before they used each other's momentum. So this is completely Metal Bat's feat to own, meaning he can take outright attacks from moon level monsters and damage them in return to some degree. So unless you're above that, then no, you won't just be beating Metal Bat before he pumps up. Metal Bat has routinely tanked countless direct hits from all kinds of monsters with all kinds of blunt, bladed, jagged, and even internal attacks. So Viltrumite punches or slices will only empower him further. And Nolan won't even realize he's making Metal Bat stronger and stronger, since he'd have no reason to think that's what's happening until it's too late. Base Metal Bat can already match or be above Nolan for combat speed, but it also improves with his pump, and it won't be long until he's not only blowing Nolan away, but completely speed blitzing him too, which makes this they win for Metal Bat, who can not only hurt Nolan long before his pump up maximum, but will be hitting him way more and breaking Nolan down significantly, while he himself only becomes harder to handle. Tatsumaki is a character who I'm sure many people thought of immediately for this video, but luckily for you, I have an entire video not only detailing Tatsumaki versus Nolan, but Tatsumaki versus Thrag too. Feel free to check that video out, as it will be in the description. They win for Tatsumaki for reasons found in that dedicated video. Watchdog Man if you've been paying close attention to the series and what it's telling you, is also another overwhelming match for Nolan too. So he'll be in the worst of troubles if he ever lands in Q City. Wanna know why Watchdog Man is supposedly so strong? Go and check out this video I did detailing why, and it'll become clear that Watchdog Man is not some middle tier S-class hero. No, he is something far deadlier. They win for Watchdog Man since the signs are very clear that he's, at minimum, a high tier S-class hero. Blast is a no-brainer for those who know the series. This is a man who would not only beat Nolan, but defeat all 40 or something remaining Viltrumites at the same time. Blast is in a completely different league to all of the heroes in this video, so I won't take up too much of your time getting into this either. They win for Blast, who was able to fight initial Cosmic Figaro, effortlessly Speed Blitz Flashy Flash, and not only react to serious Saitama and Cosmic Figaro, but contain and redirect the might of their serious punch collision with his dimensional powers. If you're familiar with Blast, you'll know the score here. And finally, we have the strongest character on this list, King. He defeated Vaccine Man with one punch, Beefcake with one punch, and even Elder Centipede with one punch. They win for King. Haters will say those feats belong to some random bald guy. Like the video, subscribe if you enjoyed it to any degree, and click on my icon to find more videos like this one.